Daniel Wild is the Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs. Daniel, you've been polling some of these regional New South Wales seats west of the Great Dividing Range, and we get a very different picture to what you're seeing in Sydney.
Yeah, we do, Ricky. There's a shadow election taking place here west of the Dividing Range. There's a lot of concern in regional parts of New South Wales that their views and values and way of life isn't being reflected in Sydney on both sides of politics. And what our polling has identified is close to 50% of those who we polled said that they were going to cast their ballot at the state election later this month for an independent or a third party. So there's a real desire for a voice that they don't feel that they have at the moment on both sides of politics. And this is largely being driven by the emissions reduction mandates, the policies of net zero that, again, both the Coalition and Labor are backing in.
Now, that polling you conducted, I believe it was somewhere sort of further north of where we broadcast in the Riverina, but was it just on the impact, say, on coal mining, but also on agriculture as well?
Yeah, look, it was broader than that. And yeah, so you're right, we looked at the seats around Dubbo, Orange, Bathurst, but the findings also relate to the areas of the Riverina where the main impact of these emissions reduction policies are on mining, agriculture, transport and manufacturing. Those are the sectors of the economy and our society that will be most impacted by these policies. What our analysis suggested is up to 138,000 jobs would be put at risk by the emissions policies of both sides here in New South Wales, and that 2/3 of those job losses are in regional and rural parts of the state. So again, as with many issues, and like what you talk about a lot, Ricky, it's not the inner city elites who are paying the price. It's people in the bush who are responsible for putting, food on the table and keeping the lights on, but they're the ones that are copping it.
Well, also, when you look at the projects looking down into Victoria as well, like VNI West, and then HumeLink in New South Wales in the Riverina, and the interconnector into South Australia, a lot of that's at the behest of renewable energy in the pursuit of net zero policies. It runs over the top of farmland, and the people over at the HumeLink project are worried it might exacerbate bushfire risk. Is that fueling some of that sentiment that they just feel like they're literally being run over the top of for the sake of a renewable energy target?
Yeah, you've hit the nail on something very significant, which is that the issue of these transmission lines and also the wind turbines and solar panels is dividing the community. The building of this infrastructure on prime agricultural land is something that locals do not want, and they've not been consulted about either. And so there's, again, this sort of palpable sense of frustration and anxiety that their views are just being dismissed, and that essentially the entire, whether you're in Victoria or New South Wales or South Australia, everything's being driven out of the capital cities, and people in regional parts of the state don't have a voice and don't have a say. And in addition to that, we know that the renewables just can't get the job done. We need to have 24/7 baseload power, but you can't get that from wind and solar, which are weather dependent and intermittent.
Some people that regional New South Wales residents did back in to get the job done was the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. They voted in 3 MPs in the electorate of Murray in the form of Helen Dalton. She went independent. Now the other 2 lower house MPs have gone independent as well. Regardless of their political allegiances right now, the political map does have quite a few independents already west of the Great Dividing Range.
Yeah, it does. And that's being driven by, this concern about both sides of politics. Like you say, it's not really about left or right. It's about having a voice. And that's what's driven a lot of the votes going towards the independents. You might also throw One Nation into the mix at the upper house. Mark Latham's hopeful to get 3 or 4 candidates into the upper house there in New South Wales. So look, there's a real search for political representation that's happening in the regions, and there's a lack of confidence in the major parties that's driving votes to the minor parties. I guess the concern there is, can the minor parties hold it together? The Shooters, as you say, had 3 people, but then they kind of disintegrated a little bit. And it's basically just they're sort of independents now. They're not sort of affiliated with the party. So, look, the concern is, can you get a third party on the right of politics that can, sustain for a generation and really build up a voter base.
Well, I do wonder, though, whether local residents are actually more interested in simply having an independent MP, not with party allegiance, that their party is the electorate, so to speak. You look at Joe McGurr in the seat of Wagga Wagga. There's a fair dinkum effort to knock him out of that seat, which I think the coalition lost because of some pretty controversial conduct by the previous coalition MP. Do you think that that's what people are actually looking for, is maybe not a party MP, but someone that just is unashamedly 100% for their electorate?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that observation, Ricky. And fundamentally, I don't think people are fussed what party they're from or whether they're an independent. They just want to make sure that they're representing their views in a proper way. What often happens is someone will get elected on a platform of, saying, yes, I'll stand up for your views and I'll tell these city-based politicians what we need in the regions. But inevitably, they lose their way over time and they end up sort of becoming subsumed by the political class. We've seen it time and time again where regional voters get taken for granted and, really they feel that they have nowhere else to turn. So I think you're right that an independent who's outspoken and that will unashamedly stand up for local communities is exactly what people here want. Whether we're going to be able to get that anytime soon remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's a good point you make, and my mind goes back to a few independents in federal parliament that ended up siding with Julia Gillard in the past, but we've run out of time to talk about that. Daniel Wild is the Deputy Executive Director at the IPA. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.